Michaeleen, should we start by talking about what WEIRD is, the WEIRD acronym, and why this is such a useful framework for understanding parenting?
Yes. So the acronym WEIRD comes from some psychologists who one of them is now at Harvard. It means Western, educated, industrialized, rich, democratic. So we're really talking about people in Western society in Western Europe and then the colonies of that, right? So Canada, Australia, the United States, and of course the UK. And what these researchers have shown over the last more than a decade is that the people with this ancestry, so Western European people, tend to have certain characteristics psychologically that are very unique. So if you go around the world and you run a bunch of these kind of very standard psychological experiments on people, these Western European people behave kind of strangely. But so they're weird in that sense. But what's interesting about it is that's the people that have been studied the most, right? So like 98% of all psychological experiments are on European people. So for a long time, psychologists thought that this kind of weird psychological behavior was kind of standard around the world. And so that's basically looking at all of psychology. And then there's another anthropologist named David Lancy who kind of took that same framework and applied it to parenting and looked at the Western weird style of parenting and also found that, what do you know, European people tend to parent very strangely too. So they have a set of characteristics in their parenting. I think he came up with almost 50, but there's really like a core 10 or dozen, which are very unique and weird. If you go around the world, you can't find them really anywhere else except for places that have been like heavily influenced by European culture.
It's a European thing and a European colonies thing, but it's also in some sense a modern thing. So like the further you go back in European history, the more our parenting looks like it looks in every other part of the world now. There's a kind of combination of geography and also economic circumstances.
Yes, absolutely. That you're exactly right. Like Western European people, it was a good gradual change, but the bulk of the change really occurred kind of around the mid 1900s. It was getting revved up kind of after the Industrial Revolution, but you're exactly right. Like not that long ago, like my grandfather was parented in a way that was not so weird. And my husband's father, even, he's a first generation American from Macedonia. And, he was parented in a way that was not so weird, right? So it's a very gradual change that has occurred. And it's a very class change, right? Like so much earlier, the wealthy kind of started parenting in a certain way. And then that kind of trickled down. And, now it's very common in middle class European American, European homes. So yes, you're exactly right that this is something historically, we didn't do as parents. We didn't do these things until really the last 50, 60 years.
Okay, so what is weird parenting? Lancy has like 50 things. I don't know if we can go through 50 things, but what are the key ways in which weird parenting is unusual?
Yeah. So one of the biggest things is that we separate children very, very starkly from the adult world. So we kind of create these two worlds, this adult world that children really aren't welcome in and are kind of pushed out of. And we go through great lengths to keep them out. And then we create this little child world that, we kind of push them into all the time. And we as parents think that we need to keep them there. So we work very hard to create activities for them that are just for them. Psychologists call them child-centric activities. They're things that parents would never do if they didn't have children. You're doing it 100% because you're a parent. And these child-centered activities are expensive, they're stressful, they take up a lot of time, and they pull the adults, the parents, out of their adult world. So this is one of the very unique things. And basically the rest of the cultures around the world, children have their own little world that they create themselves, like outside with friends or, when they're with their friends. But parents don't take them there. Parents don't, engage in that world and play with them and create these worlds. They do their own thing and they welcome the child into their world. So this is really kind of the biggest difference, and it has all these repercussions on our lives. Another thing which I'll point out is that we really think that parenting is done by two people, a mom and a dad or whatever, or even one person often when another parent is working so much, or two parents are working. And really every other culture around the world in Western parenting's past, this was unheard of. This is just crazy. And that children are actually raised by typically like 5, 6, 7 people at once.
I've read studies that I can't remember the name of the authors now, but they go and look at hunter-gatherers caring for little babies, and the babies are changing between different people's arms at this incredible
Yes.
speed. They're like just constantly kind of circulating around the group, unlike in the weird culture where typically it's basically mum, maybe dad, who will be holding them at all times or responsible for them at all times.
Yes, there's quite a few studies like this. And actually when I was traveling both in the Arctic and in Tanzania, you can see it. It's very obvious. I think in one study, they were looking at a hunter-gatherer community in Africa, and I think it was something like 12 different people held the baby in like one afternoon or something. And of course, this varies the number and from place to place. But when we were in the Arctic, like I remember this little boy, he must have been like 18 months or so. So he's like a toddler. And I watched as like, just one person from the next would pick him up. And so whenever he was set down, he was never alone or by himself for more than like a minute, and it was an array of people. It was the grandparents, it was the cousins, it was the neighbors, it was the other kids. And this is, if you look like evolutionarily, there's a lot of data both on modern hunter-gatherer communities, but also in primatology. So studies on chimpanzees and other primates. And you can really see that like humans, this is the way humans were likely parented, during our evolutionary past. So for like 200,000 of years, parents were not doing this just with the mom and the dad, that this was really a group effort, and not always 10 or 11 or 12, but at least like a couple more. And that's because when we were hunter gatherers, like two people just couldn't have gathered enough calories to take care of themselves and take care of a child. And then take care of two children, no way. They needed somebody else to be helping them. It just like the math just doesn't work out. And so we really learned this kind of cooperative style of parenting that has been basically stripped away from so many parents in our culture.
Yeah, it seems like it's the big, and I thought this while reading your book. It's the big thing, isn't it? And so much flows from it, like things like having the child-centric play. It's partly because supervising or keeping a child safe when they're just participating in adult life, if you're on your own, is hard. It's just really hard. And so putting them in like a safe room, basically, it's like a padded cell, like the playroom, right? Just putting them in there. And you're like, I can guarantee that you're not going to hurt yourself. You're not going to eat anything stupid, whatever, is a practical response to the fact that there's no one else. It's just you that's minding this child.
Yes, I think that's an excellent point. It's like it's much harder, children can't create their own child world by themselves if they don't have other children around, right? Or they don't have like a safe outdoor place to do it too, right? Somebody brought this up with me yesterday when I was helping them with their children, and you're absolutely right. There's no doubt that the two have gone hand in hand. I think though there are examples in the ethnographic record and in anthropological studies where parents are pretty isolated, and yet they still do these other things with children, and I think because I think another weird thing that ties into this is that we have this idea that, and this is very weird, this is very strange, you don't see this really anywhere, is that children need to be entertained. That one of the jobs of the parents is to like keep them busy and to entertain them and to stimulate them, right? Like we're taught to constantly talk to them and show them things and direct their attention. And this, so yes, now you're by yourself doing a job that 5 people are supposed to do, and you're tasked with entertaining this child. I mean, this is just like horribly stressful, huge amounts of work. And yet the child is not really equipped to handle it this way. This is not how their brains evolved to work. And so I think adding this element or this ingredient of like, you need to entertain the child and the child needs your entertainment just makes it so much harder, right? When in fact, many examples I've seen, and you can find them all over studies, is of just 6-month-old, 9-month-old, 12-month-old just sitting there, entertaining themselves. Like a mom will hand them a pot, and like it's like, like in a spoon, and it's like, and there's some really beautiful examples of this. I think we have a hard time with that. Like we if they fuss a little bit or they cry or they come over and they want our attention, they're trained very early to get our attention. And so I think a little bit of it is like, you just got to leave them alone. You really do. Yes, keep them safe. You're not just ignoring them completely, but it's like, keep an eye on them and let them be, let them explore, let them interact with the world. I mean, as little babies and toddlers, they need very little world to interact with. So I totally agree with you 100% that like not having these other people around makes it so much harder. But at the same time, we're making it even harder by thinking that it's our job to like talk to them face to face all the time, give them screens, give them entertainment, when in fact, children really are designed to like do all this for themselves. And they learn very quickly too. And so that's why I talk a lot about in the book, like, record yourself when you're like with your phone, like your audio or whatever you have, and listen to how much you're actually talking to your child and like how much you're telling them what to do. And it's a lot. And I think it's a lot of stress for the parent to do this, but also like the child doesn't need it at all. You can just leave them alone and keep an eye on them and give them something to kind of, work on, so to speak. Does that make sense?
Mm-mm. One of the things, and you write about this as well, right? One of the things that's difficult about modern parenting is competing parenting philosophies, which is, again, a weird thing, right? The fact
Yes,
that you
it
have
is.
this constant kind of turnover of different parenting fashions, and which are completely, they contradict each other entirely.
Yes.
And a lot of it is, it may not be designed in this way, but a lot of it has the effect of provoking guilt in parents. So you're like, oh no, I should be doing more entertainment. I should be more didactic in how I relate to my children. I should be focused on them more. And you're saying that actually that's not natural to have that level of like laser focus.
Yeah, absolutely. Like it's just weird, right? You just don't find it anywhere else. And so it kind of, to me, that begs the question of like, is it necessary? Right? I mean, it's a lot of work, right? And I kind of hated it. To be honest, I hated sitting down on the floor with a toddler and like playing with her. I couldn't stand it. And so, and then you're right, I felt guilty because I hated it, right? But then like seeing how, okay, this isn't the way I've seen any other parent around the world do this. And then I started reading, it's like, okay, this isn't necessary. And in fact, I think in some ways it has a lot of disadvantages for the child. I'm not saying it's going to hurt the child. I'm not saying any of that. Like, I'm sure it's, like you said, there's just all these different ways of doing it. I mean, another weird thing is that we not only go through these phases of like, okay, now here's how you need to parent, and now here's the opposite of how you need to parent, but we're, like you said, like really judgmental about it, right? That if you don't do it this one way, or you don't say this one thing, then you're like a bad parent and you're going to hurt your child. Like, this is like crazy. And children are just so much more resilient than that, right? And there's just so many ways around the world that parents do it. That if it works for you and you feel good about it and you have a good relationship with your child and they seem to be happy, and then, great, keep doing it. I think the problem comes when we start to feel like, oh my God, this just doesn't work. Like, my kid's screaming all the time. I'm stressed. I hate this, And then it's like you start to ask questions like, is this necessary? Is this necessary to entertain my child at every moment? Or could there be some advantages for her and for the mom and for me of not doing this? What does a child gain when you back off and allow them, a lot of autonomy in their attention and a lot of autonomy in their play? I think for a lot of children, they would mentally and psychologically really benefit from that. And I think the parent would too, and the relationship would improve.
There's the style of parenting philosophy, and you see this across the board, regardless of whether it's kind of, pro sleep training or gentle parenting or whatever it is. The style that I really, really hate as a mom is the style that tells you your intuition is wrong, that makes you relearn things or suppress things, or like you'll go on. I get served this stuff all the time on social media. It will be things like things you say to your child. Example of something everyone says to their child. Here's what you should say instead. Like that you should be, yeah, you should have that constant level of self-criticism and self-improvement, and just seeing it as like hard work, rather than just saying and doing the things that feel normal. Like I'm what I gather from reading you is that basically the most normal and natural way in terms of our revolutionary history to be with your children is to be with other parents or other family members, doing normal adult things, talking to the other adults, and the children are there and they're listening to you and they're doing their own thing, and maybe they're playing with the other children, but there's a kind of just ambient togetherness. That's
that is
like
exactly
the normal
right.
way. Yeah.
It's just kind of continuing your adult life, right? Instead of like, I think we go through this phase in motherhood and parenthood where it's like, oh, now I have a child, now I'm this parent, and a lot of the things I did as an adult are now out of question, except for when you have the nanny or a sitter, right? And this is saying like, no, like I'm going to go on with my adult life, and sometimes I have to modify it a little bit, but I'm going to include you as I can. Right. And yeah, I think you're exactly right. And I had to say about the thing about like, okay, don't say this, say this, it makes me upset, because it's like, yeah, it's causing all this doubt, right? In the parents. And really what we want, parents need more confidence, right? And like, parents or children want us to be confident and be like, this is what's good for you. And, me not playing with you, that's good for you. And, and, be confident in our decisions and change if you need. I think we also are not taught to, or encouraged to watch the child and experiment with our children, right? And see like, okay, if I do this, if I put you at a child-centered museum or play area all day, what's the result of that? Are you happy at the end of it? Are you well behaved? Are you enjoyable to be with? Or are you like crazy, and are you like way overstimulated? And what's the end result of that for the parent too? Like, do you feel good after that? And like, watch your child and try things, and then try words, try statements. If this feels right, say it, and see how your child takes it, and then modify it. I think we're taught that there's, like you said, that there's this one way of doing it. And if you don't do it that way, you're like a bad parent. And when in fact, like, every family's different. Every child's different. I'd ask parents when we traveled, like, well, what age do you do this? And what age do you do that? And they would all say like, I don't know. It depends on the child, and you have to watch him and you have to figure out. I feel like the last thing we need is like to put more doubt in self-criticism, like you said, into our parenting. And there's no right or wrong thing to say really to a child. I mean, you can say some really mean things to a child in a really nice way, especially little kids, and they think you're being really nice, right? Because it's all about tone and emotion, and right. So yeah, the scripts, I'm with you. They really, I don't think that they're helping us a lot, right?
What do you think's going on with this sort of parenting philosophies, fashion stuff? Like if you just look over the last 100 years, say, we have seen every flip flop you can imagine on feeding, on sleeping, on discipline, on everything. Why do you think that modern life generates this constant flux?
Well, I think there's a couple of things. I think you've already nailed one of them, and that's because we've lost the people who teach us to parent, right? So in many cultures, when a woman becomes a mom for the first time, she has at least one, probably two or three other people, other women and that she's very close to and interacts with hours each day who have parented and parented a lot. And they're there to help her. Just the other day, we live now in Texas, and we live in kind of rural Texas. And a few months ago, I visited with this family, and this Mexican American family, and a 22-year-old woman was getting ready to have a baby. And I thought to myself, oh my gosh, like if I was 22 having a baby, it would be like, I would have no clue what to do, right? I had no clue at 40. So like 22, it would have been a hot mess. But this woman has a very strong family support system where 25 of her family members all live in the same block, and her mom, her grandmother, her aunts, her cousins are there, and these women were like, we can't wait to help her take care of this baby. They were like, they were more excited about the baby than she was. And these women have raised children, and so really in many parts of the world, and I want to say the fathers are part of this too. I always focus so much on the women because that's who I am. But fathers are the same, and many cultures, fathers play a huge role. And it just shows that like this young woman who's 22 is going to have these incredible teachers to show her with confidence what works because they've been through it and they've seen it. And that's what we've lost. And so, and you can see this in actually the historical rise of parenting books in European culture. You can see as these allo parents, these other parents were removed from the home, parenting books became really popular and parenting books became more common. And it's because people don't know how to do it. And I think that this really brings these kind of flip-flops. Because we don't know how to do it, we look to these books that are often written by men, sometimes who aren't parents, but that are writing from a very narrow perspective. They don't know about your child. They don't know about your situation. And so we're hungry. We're hungry for this knowledge. We also don't see children being raised as when we're little, right? So in many cultures, a young person watches through this like network of support that we're talking about, watches like, half a dozen kids grow up and learns to parent even through that. So I think we're kind of starved for knowledge, and we're given this task that we're not trained to do really. But I also think we're just so competitive, it's like, and I don't know why when parenting became like a competitive sport, but I don't know what happened, but it's like the amount of judgment other women put on each other, it hurts me. My heart aches, to see it and to feel it myself. And it's like, give each other a break.
My impression is that this competitiveness goes on generally between women who are non-kin, right? That it's and I wonder if there's something going on there where it doesn't feel as if it's a collaborative piece of work, raising your children. It feels
Yes.
as if there's unlike in the natural extended kin network where everyone has a genetic investment in this child, everyone has some level of involvement with this child. It feels like parenting culture, parenting guidance books, all of this kind of stuff, there's much more antagonism actually between different like nuclear units.
Yeah, it could be like, it's interesting because in some hunter-gatherer communities, they don't hang out with their kin. It's really interesting. Like it is common too in many places, but I always say like these allo parents like totally don't need to be related to you, and often aren't in many places. I think maybe it also goes back to like the weirdness,
Yeah.
a big component of like our weird psychology. This is fascinating to me. Is we know individualism, right? that we teach children and we teach ourselves individualism by saying, look, decide what you want and go get it no matter what, right? And I think this breeds a lot of competitiveness. But one of the very strange things, and I think about this a lot with the weird psychology, is that in Western cultures, people tend to be nicer and trust even more like strangers than their own family members. And I see it like in my family, like where people will be so grumpy and so mean and like rah, 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 and like getting really angry, and then like a person will come and like ask you a question like in a restaurant or something, you're like, oh hi, and it's, and you're like super nice to them and polite, and you're like, wait, how come I don't get that niceness, so we have this very flipped around kind of thing, or I don't really understand where it comes from, where we tend to be taught to be really kind to strangers and people we don't really know that well, and kind of mean to our kin. So I don't know if that's kind of actually going against the hypothesis, but I don't really know. It is like more, it's just kind of, it is like a cultural value, competitiveness. And like somehow we think that being mean to other people like makes us feel better. I'm not sure. My daughter and I talk about this a lot because, she deals with it with her friends, right? In this kind of meanness, these mean girl kind of things. And it's like, I mean, because that starts really early, this kind of competitive cattiness, and so I don't know where, it's a mystery, but it doesn't make us feel good, and it's not helping us, and it's really hurting us as parents, right? Because what we need, like I say, is more support and not this judgment.
Many of you will know that Christianity is a subject of fascination for me, and the role of Christianity in shaping the modern world is a theme I return to again and again on the podcast. My view is that we really can't understand the world or ourselves without getting to grips with it, which is why I'm very glad to point you towards a new online course called 321. It's an introduction to Christianity that's imaginative, thoughtful, engaging. It assumes absolutely no prior knowledge. It's presented by the wonderful Glenn Scrivener, who has been a guest on the MMM podcast previously, and I've also been a guest on his show. Glenn presents 8 video-led sessions which are based around some beautiful animated stories that illustrate the Christian message. You can check it out for free at 321course.com/MMM. Just enter your email, choose a password, and you're in. There's no spam, there's no fees. Just visit 321course.com/MMM. And now onto the show. Western individualism is such a crazy thing because on the one hand, there are upsides to it. There are big upsides to it.
Sure.
It's probably the best social technology we've ever found for generating wealth and technological innovation and all this stuff. I always think the trade-off with modern parenting is in some ways it's so much harder because of the isolation and because of the competitiveness and all this stuff you describe. But also, on the other hand, we have child mortality that is as close to zero as has ever historically occurred. Whereas all of the cultures we're describing here, we're talking like 40% child mortality before the age of 15, that kind of range, which seems to be the species norm. That's the big trade-off. And I did think about this as well in relation to some of this stuff about, like, hunter-gatherers famously, as you describe, as others describe, tend to be more risk tolerant with their children. They tend to be more willing to let children kind of do adult tasks, hold sharp objects, go near fires, do all this,
climb big things.
all this stuff, which in some ways, clearly, I mean, this is something that Jonathan Haidt has written about a lot, this like necessity of children taking risks in order to learn.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
They are also doing this in the context of very high child mortality rates and where there is kind of a greater acceptance of high mortality. Whereas we just have a completely different view of that because we often, we have maybe one child, we have 2 child, and they are these like the thought of
precious things.
Yeah, and the thought of losing them is like is it's so rare, and I think the rareness of it makes it more psychologically intolerable than for people.
Yeah, it's fascinating, right? That like they have this high mortality rate, and yet they're kind of,
they lean into it a little bit, like they kind of
David Lancey has written a lot about this, right? He calls children in Western culture like cherubs, like they're, and he also he's told me he calls it like the shrink wrapping of the child, where like you put like a plastic wrap around them, and then so they never get injured and they're preserved, but there's got to be some sweet spot between it, right? Like there's got to be some where you're still allowing the child to have freedom to grow and explore, like exploration and risk taking. And I don't think I'm not talking about huge amounts of risk, right? It's a fundamental need of humans, right? And we take it away, I think it generates lots of anxiety, and children find it in other ways, right? So I think there's got to be a sweet spot, and it's interesting because yes, in many cultures, parents like you described are more tolerant. And like I asked one of the researchers in the Maya community, like, but do kids get hurt more often? And she's like, yes, kids get broken arms and cuts and burns, and like, so you're exactly right, this trade-off. But at the same time, the parents aren't like just not neglecting it all, right? Like I talk a little bit about this in the book, like they're watching all the time and trying to prevent injury. So it's not like they're just letting the kid climb the tree and they're not looking, right? Like somebody's underneath there spotting the child. Like there's something that happened when we were in the Maya village. This little girl was like, I think she was like 4 or 5, and she was trying to ride this bike, and the bike was clearly too big for her. But she was like experimenting. She was getting on it and kind of going down a hill, and getting on it and going down a hill, like in the grass. And it looked like nobody was watching her and nobody was paying attention. And this would never have happened, right? Like in my neighborhood here, even in rural Texas or in San Francisco, no way, a 3-year-old on a giant bike, right? And she must have tried it like 10 times. And then finally one time she got on it and she was really rolling fast, like into the road. And like 3 women from like different corners, like from one house, I think, and like outside, like ran over and caught her. And it was like just so striking to me because it was like, okay, they were clearly allowing her to take these risks and experiment and grow, and could she have gotten hurt? Sure. But at the same time, they were like trying to prevent it too, right? And really watching out. And so I think we can kind of take inspiration from that and be like, okay, we're going to let our kids explore and take risks a little bit, but I'm going to like be there, and I'm going to like, stand under the child or hold the child's hand or keep my eye out, and stay close while the child's experimenting. And if it goes farther than I think, I'm going to like intervene. It's just like you were saying, like we just swing so far, right? It's like, oh, we don't want our children to get hurt, so we're just not going to let them do anything, And it's like, but there's somewhere in between, right? That I think kids need us to find, because there's no doubt, like you say, like work shows that this shrink wrapping, this like no risk taking, yes, they don't get hurt, but they mentally, I think it is hurting them for some children.
I wonder if part of the reason for the flip-flopping with parenting philosophies over the last century is because there's a degree of improvisation. I think there's also a degree of scientism that people,
Yes.
which again, I think is a weird characteristic, that people will take the pronouncements of experts extraordinarily seriously. And so you'll latch on to whatever it is, you must, I don't know, like flipping from
Yes.
a very disciplinarian approach to gentle parenting, for instance, which has happened over the last half century. It becomes evident that this extreme approach is not working. And rather than arrive at a happy medium, there's a tendency to just completely flip it on its head and advocate the opposite thing. And so we see this sort of constant cycle of actually very extreme positions.
I think you're absolutely right. And I think you're onto something like important, that we think the science can like fix it for us, right? And tell us how to do it. When in fact, the science is so messy. Science of children is so messy. Science of families, right? I mean, you've said really what science has done in this extraordinary way, right? Vaccines and antibiotics and keeping our children like physically very safe and healthy, right? But in terms of like behavior and mental health, it's kind
The
of a train
psychological
wreck.
stuff, it's not so clear cut at all. Yeah.
No, in fact, we've gone the other way, right? I mean, if you look at the data, our children are not or the least happy they've been in a long time, and lonely and depressed and anxious, right? I mean, so I think you're right. We've embraced the cynicism, no doubt. And I think it's kind of led us down this. I mean, it's one factor, I think, in creating, this mental health problem that we've got right now, with children. So there's a good quote. I don't know who said it, but they were talking about babies, but they said something like, experiments and studies on babies say more about the researchers than the baby. I mean, like it's kind of that way. It's just so messy. Like one of the psychologists said in my book, like it's easier to land on Mars, land a rover on Mars than it is to like figure out to do a science experiment on toddlers' tantrums. It's there's just too many factors and too many variables, and then children change, and you think you've got it like figured out, and then they're different. But what you said earlier was so right. Like we have it in us, like this instinct, and I think if we listen to that, we watch our children, we see how what we're doing affects them, and okay, this isn't working so well. Let me try to change it. And I had an Inuit mom read the book after it was done, and she's in the book, Corinne, and she told me, she was like, this is fine, this is all good, like, she was very kind of nonchalant about it. And then she said, but you don't need this. She's like, you just need to like stop and say to yourself, is what I'm going to do like make my relationship with the child worse, or is it going to make it better? And if it's going to make it worse, maybe I should think about doing it a different way. And I think about this a lot. Like even with my husband, I think about this, like, okay, if what I'm going to say right now, is this going to make it worse, or is this going to make our relationship better? And then like, is there a way or something I can do to kind of lean towards the better instead of the worst?
I suppose one criticism that you might make of the project, which in general I'm very with, I think if we are the only culture that is doing this, that probably means we're wrong. It doesn't necessarily mean that we're wrong,
At
but
least
like
we should question it. Yes,
exactly. That's like fairly good evidence for thinking that we might be the ones who've made a mistake. And like when it's something like child rearing, which everyone has been doing literally, the entire species history, right? That's reason to doubt. I suppose one pushback that someone might give though is that we are also to some extent raising children for a very different adult life. We're raising them to go and do email jobs and have to, like you talk, for instance, about sleep patterns, the fact that the kind of the 8-hour single block of sleep at night is to some extent a creation of the Industrial Revolution. People are more likely to sleep in shifts or to have siestas and things like that. But also that is our reality now. We do have to get up at 6 to go to work. Is there an argument for saying that maybe if we were to completely lean into the hunter-gatherer way of raising children, we might do them a disservice, and that we wouldn't be raising them for the Western adulthood that they have to expect? Do you see my point?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think absolutely, right? If you could, number one, you can't like lean into it super hard, right? Like, because it's just, especially if you live in a city, or like, it's just, you're not set up to, right? So,
yeah,
but
you'd have to go and live in
a
rural commune or something maybe, but basically
right,
very
exactly.
difficult. Yeah.
And then what are you raising your child for? To be, it's maybe different, right?
Yeah.
Like I say in the book, like I'm not going to be able to raise my daughter like in a Maya village, it's just not, right? And I don't want to. I don't live in a Maya village, and I'm not Mayan, and but I think it's so. Yes, I think you're exactly right. Like we're to be honest, like we're living in a time that we don't even know what the future holds. Right. I mean, that's what I've been really like feeling recently. It's like, what is it going to look like when my daughter goes to college? I don't know, because like 10 years ago, we didn't even, or 15 years ago, most parents didn't have iPhones, right? So 15 years from now, what is it going to be like? Who knows, right? So that question is hard to answer, right? But you're exactly right. Like, I mean, this is a very different place. This is a very different time. I think, though, there are a lot of people have a lot of problems with what we're doing right now, and there's a true struggle, And personally, and then what after, this book's been out 3 years now, just from interacting with parents and talking to parents, like adding a little bit of this back into your life helps a lot of children and helps a lot of parents. And I say to people, like, you don't need to do it like all the time, every day. You can't, but just like having a few hours on the weekend for like the child to have autonomy, or one meal a week, making it together and including them, or cutting out two of the child-centered activities and just hanging out in your house or in your yard, and like not entertaining them. Just a little bit of this can really shift a child in your relationship. And then maybe you want to add more. The skills that are being taught and the values that are being taught through this kind of more cooperative dynamic between parents and children. Like really, this book is about teaching children to be cooperative, teaching them how to be respectful to other people and treating them with kindness. It's kind of eroding a little bit out that competitive conflictualness. That's kind of what the goal is. And I actually think it can help children in the so-called modern world. It helped me. Like learning that helped my career enormously. Like I was never taught how to cooperate, really, really cooperate. And once I learned through writing this book, like my career really took off. And so I think, yes, we don't know what the future holds, and, it's a very different world. But some of these skills could give a child like an advantage in the sense that other people don't have them so much. But also, I just feel better. I mean, our family just like enjoys each other, like we literally do. Like after like 3 years of using all these methods, and my mom now lives next door, and like we actually get along. Like I use the same methods on her, and like, my husband is on board because we're less stressed and we like enjoy life more. So we can't go back.
Let's get into some of the nitty-gritty of what hunter-gatherers actually do. And what other cultures do as well. Like what are the big issues, So like breastfeeding. I mean, I assume everyone breastfeeds, right? Because there's just no alternative. But is that I guess there's sometimes wet nursing goes on if there are feeding problems.
Yes. And I think clearly like some of the hunter-gatherer communities, there is formula, right? The Inuit have formula, but that
because it's been imported from Western.
Yes.
Okay.
There's no schedules of feeding, and somebody's carrying the baby, and I do want to point out that it is cooperative, right? Like the mom might carry the baby more, but there's lots of help, right, that we don't have. There's not a lot of crying because the baby is touching somebody so much, right? Mm-hmm. And then, of course, this is just common everywhere in the world besides Western culture. Like it's group sleeping, right? Like maybe not the whole family, but like rarely do people sleep alone in a room. And like never does a baby sleep alone in a room. And I've documented this very extensively through research. Like this is very, very rare to put a baby in a room by themselves. And even now in Western culture, it's not the standard, right? The baby's usually told be in the room, but on a different surface, right? But just in general, even with kids, like it's sleeping, even in Western culture up until like 100 years ago, sleeping was a very social event. And so everyone sleeps with somebody else, near somebody else. And then children are given an enormous amount of autonomy. Like I've said recently, like I think Americans and Europeans and Brits don't really know what autonomy looks like for a child. I really do, because I didn't know until I traveled and saw it. And then another big thing is what we've kind of already touched on, is that the child is welcomed into the adult world. So there's all these experiments that show, in Western culture, if little children want to help with something, say come help cook with dinner or help fold the laundry, or, that the parents will shoo them away. Go play, put a screen in front of them, entertain them. They'll do these tasks when the child is asleep or away, childcare. This is very unique. And what happens is that when the child shows some interest, the parent will somehow try to include them in the task, starting at from a very young age, like the baby sat next to them or they're on their back. And so by the time they're 6 or 7, they start to develop more skills at these tasks. And by the time they're 9, 10, 11, 12, they can do these tasks and are very helpful. So this is very common. The children are involved in everything, or at least welcomed. So like when we were with the Hadzabe in Tanzania, the women would get firewood, they go tuber foraging, they go down to the river, and really any kid that wanted to go and do it was welcomed, and came along, and it ended up being like somebody carrying them, or they were given a task to carry a small water bottle, or they were given a task to carry small wood. This is how children learn and connect and learn to cooperate.
I was just thinking about that helping thing. To some extent, you have to not be too worried about punctuality if that's you're incorporating that into your day. Like one of the tasks that my 3-year-old loves doing is spraying down the table and wiping up the table after a meal. And he does quite a good job of it, but man, it takes a long time. It's like 15 minutes or something, because he has to get up
Wow.
on every chair to like reach the middle of the table because he's so small. And it's very sweet and he loves doing it. And I figure it is exactly this thing of he's learning to do an adult task. He's doing something that's genuinely helpful as well. It's not fake task. He actually does a fairly good job. Yeah, if you're rushing off somewhere though, you can't really have them doing all of this. But I guess this is also part of the hunter-gatherer way of life, that there isn't really that same. I mean, no one has clocks. Well, they do now, maybe because they've got them from other cultures, but traditionally.
Yeah, one of the moms told me, because I was like, when we were up in the Arctic, they do have clocks, but even I was like, okay, so we're going to do this interview at 11, and then we're going to do this interview at 11:30, and we're going to do this interview at 12. And one of the moms was like, she was like, wow. She was
What?
Just like,
Yeah.
she was just like, you go off of time, but we go off of feeling.
Yeah.
Yes, it's true. And again, it's one of those things where like, you don't have to do it all the time, like a little bit, right? Like when I first started, I mean, in the mornings, Rosie doesn't help very much at all because we're so busy, right? And like, but on the weekends, instead of like having our schedule packed on Saturday and Sunday, like we take a morning or 2 mornings and the project and the activity is like cooking together and cleaning. Actually, Sundays is cleaning. Now we've been doing it so much now that she gets up and she starts cleaning. It's like really,
that's lovely.
It's really amazing.
Yeah.
So, I mean, like, but no, I don't do it all the time. There's no way, right? It's just adding a little bit, right? And it goes so far, because if you think about it, they say you can learn like a language with like 15 minutes a day, right? So like an hour a week of cleaning, they're going to learn to clean, right?
Mm-hmm.
So no, for sure. And I think we can learn a little bit from not being so punctual, not for our jobs. But I was inspired by that lifestyle to like just kind of slow down some, and like when I can, and kind of cut out the stuff that's really not necessary, and just kind of enjoy a little bit more of like hanging out together, and because then kids can start to figure out what they really enjoy doing. I think that's a big problem these days, is that kids have been, and I think it gets to this mental health problem, like kids have been told what to do from a very early age. Okay, now you're going to go to this music class, and now you're going to do this, and now you've got screen time, and now you do this. And that by the time they're like 7, 8, 9, they don't really know what they want to do, what they enjoy, and what gives them a pleasure, and I think it's one of the screen problems, is because that's kind of what they've learned is enjoyment and pleasure. And so I think slowing down a little bit can help them figure that out.
Can I ask about the group sleeping thing as well?
Yeah.
A blunt question. How do adults have sex? Is
it's so
are people
fascinating.
less thingy about privacy, or?
Yeah, so privacy is like a crazy, weird thing. Like
Okay.
The rise of privacy is like super interesting. And it's really the last like 150 years that we've become obsessed with privacy. So what's interesting, I don't know exactly how people have sex. I haven't like researched it, but I do know that in hunter-gatherer, on average, in hunter-gatherer communities, there's more sex.
Okay. So they're doing it somehow. Yeah.
Yes, I think they figure it out. My husband asked this too. So like, I think like just I haven't investigated, but my cursory reading of it is it's not a problem. So,
Okay,
um,
cool.
but I have to say that like it's interesting. Marcel, how do you say his name? Marcel Proust. He has a whole section on how miserable it was to be separated from his mom at night. It's really fascinating. I think a lot of children really it's beautiful. It's the way he describes it and everything, but like it's like torture that he has to like be away from her. But I think a lot of children want that. I think a lot of children are totally fine sleeping alone, but I think a lot of children really want that warm body, whether it's a parent or a sibling or a dog.
I get up at least once a night to check on my son. He's in another room, but it's like more because we don't have space in our room for his cot. So he's in like the next room, but the doors are open. So he's like 5 meters away, and I get up once or twice a night, just always. And I think I don't know if I'll ever stop. But yeah, it does seem to be instinctive. And I chose not to sleep train actually. I mean, I chose not to sleep train not because I was freaked out by the all the evidence on cortisol levels or whatever, because I think that there is a tendency to catastrophize. All of these parenting philosophies have a tendency to catastrophize and to try and tell you that this is going to cause permanent harm to your baby, whatever. Even something like, I very much err on the side of thinking that breastfeeding is almost certainly better than formula just because we don't really know what goes into breast milk, not completely. And there are certain immune factors that are in breast milk which aren't in formula. And there are, but I also admit that the evidence is not that strong. And it's certainly not like formula is catastrophic at all. So like most of these
Right,
decisions, it's
right.
basically not a massive deal. It's all basically fine unless you're being
Yes,
horribly neglectful or abusive. It is basically fine. But I've kind of felt with the sleep training like it stressed me out. I didn't like it.
yes.
I didn't like the crying. I felt anxious, more of a self-centered decision than anything. It was like I actually feel happier co-sleeping than I do trying this. So I'm going to do that, even though I think probably my baby will be fine either way.
That's beautiful, right? I think that that's like a north star for parents. It's like how do you feel in this moment? You know, like how is this parenting choice affecting you? Like that should be 75% of it, you know? And like that's what I think this like what you're talking about earlier, like all this advice and criticism and self-doubt, that's what's getting taken away is this like, wait, how does this feel for me? You know, what is feels right for me? Because when you feel good, your child's gonna feel good, right? They pick up on everything, and it's like I love that. You know, you're exactly right. Like it is stressful, right? Like I'm with you, and I feel like I want parents to feel like they can make that decision like that all the time. You know, and knowing what you just said earlier, like that, it's especially when you do something once or twice. You know, it's never gonna like so try it, and then you can always course correct at every moment. Children are so flexible mentally, you know, until they get into the teenage years, and even then, they still are. So we all sleep together, like not on the same surface, but in the same room. As a little girl, I felt so lonely at night. I was like Marcel. I was like, I read that and I was like, this is how I felt, and I felt so lonely. And like I said, like I don't think all kids feel that way, but I think some do. And I just enjoy being in this like one room together, you know. But it does have its disadvantages, and I think eventually Rosie will want to be in her own space, which is fine.
The episode is not over. There is another maybe 30 minutes of content, but it is behind a paywall. If you would like access to that content, if you would like to show support for the show, paid subscriptions are what keep it on the road. Allow me to pay my producers, put food on the table, all that important stuff. The extended version of the podcast is available at my Substack, louiseperry.substack.com. That's where you can also find, as I say every week, bonus episodes, extended episodes, the MMM chat community, all of this. Please sign up for a paid subscription. It makes such an enormous difference to my ability to keep producing the podcast and grow it even bigger, produce more episodes, all that good stuff. There are other ways that you can show your support for the show as well. You can rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. You can like us on YouTube. You can tell your friends and family how much you like the show. If you find it valuable, all of these things make an enormous difference to our ability to keep making it. Thank you so much.